مردم ایران نشون دادن در طول تاریخ با همه دشواری‌ها و مقاطع مختلف و سرسختی‌هایی که نشون دادن این دوران رو طی می‌کنن. در حوزه هنر فکر می‌کنیم بیش از هر حوزه‌ای می‌تونیم در واقع بازنمایی بکنیم صبر، ایستادگی، مقاومت، رواداری، تاب‌آوری و همبستگی ملیمون رو در دفاع از میهن
مردم ایران واقعا پشت سر هم هستن و به هم اعتماد و اعتقاد دارن و همین حرکت‌های زیبا هم واقعا دلیل این اتحاد و اتفاق مردم هستش و با فرهنگ غنیشون به دنیا نشون میدن که واقعا پشت سر هم هستن و هیچ عاملی نمیتونه اتحادشون رو به هم بزنه.
همراهی کنیم با مردم و خب یک اقتدار ملت رو نشون میده این همیاری ما وقتی میایم توی مراسم شرکت میکنیم و نشون میدیم که هیچ ترسی نداریم واقعا از این جور چیزا و یه جوریه که یک پایان باید بدیم به این جنگ و به همه این اتفاقایی که داره میفته.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome again to Syriana Analysis. I'm your host, Kevork Almassian. Thank you very much for tuning in to today's live streaming. I appreciate you all, whether you're watching this stream on YouTube, on Rumble, or on Ganjim Word. Our friend Richard Medhurst will join us a little bit later, just a few minutes. He's going to come, and he texted me now that he will be just 5 minutes late. That's why I started this live streaming with you until he comes. And I agree with you. I also wish that I understood Persian. I was always fascinated by the Persian language and civilization. And in Armenia, many Armenians have a very positive experience with the Iranian people, especially the tourists who come to Armenia. And we have not seen, let's say, any type of behavior which gave a bad impression about them. At the current moment, I live in Germany, and I have met many Iranians here as well in the diaspora. Of course, politically, they vary. Some understand what's going on in their country, and some do not. And this is just my humble opinion. Now, there is a trend, unfortunately, among many mainstream media outlets, among US politicians, and this narrative has been also indoctrinated to some of the Iranian diaspora, that if and when the Americans and the Israelis bomb Iranian facilities, Iranian infrastructure, Iranian energy sector, Iranian fuel warehouses, Iranian army, Iranian scientific centers, Iranian universities, which happened only today, then this is not a war against the Iranian people, but against what they call the mullah regime. And I want to be very honest with these people, and I would say these people are either completely delusional or they are deliberately doing propaganda for Israel. I have heard this many, many times in the past, and I'm tired of hearing this, that this is not a war against Iraq, this is a war against Saddam Hussein. And then when they occupy Iraq, they divide the country into ethnic and sectarian lines, they loot its gold, they loot its artifacts. They do the same thing in Libya. They divide it into 3 regions, and then they loot its gold again and its fuel. They do the same thing in Syria. And then after all these experiences, somebody comes and tells me, this is not a war against the Iranian people. This is not a war against Iran. This is a war against the Iranian mullahs. And you understand my position about Iran. I'm not in favor of a theocratic state or any type of religious state. And I'm not going to move and live in Iran. However, I'm a type of a guy who believes that US, Israeli, and in general Western intervention in West Asia and the Middle East has always been counterproductive, and especially against the interests of the people. Now, there are people like PBD, Patrick Bet-David, who is a very delusional person when it comes to Iran, because he thinks that he lived in Iran for 9 years when he was a kiddo, and now he understands all the Middle Eastern geopolitics, right? And he says things like, if the Iranian mullah regime is gone, then we will have a great Iranian economy. And I will ask a question. If, let's say, the current political system is gone, who is going to come and fill the economic vacuum? Are the investors going to be Iranian? Are they going to be Persians? Or the multinational corporations, just like they do now in Syria, they will take over the oil fields, they will take over telecommunication, they will take over the security, and they will destroy the Iranian army to the extent that the country will become just a police state. They don't have an army, just like in Syria. And speaking of Syria, what happened to the security and stability in the country in the past few weeks, in the past few months, is a clear indication that when you have a power vacuum and you allow chaotic, basically, groups to take over the country, then the security will be neglected. And in some cases, attacks against minorities, religious and ethnic minorities, will be encouraged, because when you have people in the Jolani army or the Jolani regime whose ideology is basically very identical to ISIS, and these people commit massacres against the Alawite community in Homs, Hama, Latakia, Tartouche, Jable, Banyas, and then they point their guns against the Druze. They couldn't do it against the Kurds because they have a big military power. However, they did it against every minority which doesn't have enough military power. And I explained to you when the regime change happened, and I told you that the Jolani regime believes in Ibn Taymiyyah's teachings, and Ibn Taymiyyah's teachings tell them and order them to prosecute and persecute and kill, basically, first of all, the minority sects in Islam, because they believe they are the worst type of infidels in their eyes. So they say we have to purify our own domestic home first, the Islamic minorities, and then we move to other religions such as Christianity and Judaism and other religions. So in their eyes, the people who deserve to be killed the most are the minorities among Islam, and then other communities. And this week, yesterday, there was a terrorist attack against a church in Damascus, and they have killed around 30 civilians praying inside the church. And now the Jolani regime comes and said this was an ISIS terrorist attack. They didn't even call it a terrorist attack. They just said this is a criminal explosion. They don't even want to call it a terrorist attack. But when this type of terrorist attacks happened against the Alawite community in the coastal cities, and when the Jolani regime said that they will need 3 months or 6 months to finalize the investigation, and up until this moment we don't have any clue about what happened to the investigation and who committed these heinous crimes, then this is an encouragement to continue this type of crimes. Our friend Richard has joined this conversation. I would like to include him to this conversation. Richard, Habibi, thank you so much for coming to the show. It's really nice to see you again on screen, unfortunately. I think we don't have your voice yet. Probably you have to check in the settings on the screen. If you go to settings and then audio, you have to pick your input for we still cannot hear you. Yeah, you will arrange this, don't worry. So as I was telling you guys, this attack against the Christian church has killed around 30 Syrian Christian Orthodox, Greek Orthodox in the city. And today Jolani issued a statement basically saying that he feels sorry for the victims of the criminal act or the criminal explosion in the church. And they are blaming it. Yeah, we can hear you now, Richard. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm fine. It's good to see you too, Habibi. And I mean,
I'm sorry for insisting on this. I know you had a hard day and a long day. I'm also sitting in front of this light, and it feels like my migraine is also moving very badly.
No, it's so bloody hot, man. Like, it's not Damascus hot, but you know, it's like a different climate here. It's humid and anyway. No, but I was listening to you, you know, just now in the intro, and I mean, I'll let you lead the show, of course, right? Like, it's after you, but I'm really upset about this whole attack. It's really.
I think it was a very speculative. We anticipated it for a long time, and this was only natural development after coming after the Alawites and the Druze.
Yeah.
I was explaining the teachings of Ibn Taymiyyah that they say they have to quote unquote purify their own domestic home, which is the sects spawned from the Orthodox Islam, and they consider them first worthy of fighting against, and then they would come after the Christians. And I have said this for some time. I said, Christians shouldn't be very sure that the Jolani regime will not come after them, because during the war they have already targeted the Christian community to the extent that 90% of the Christians fled the country.
Exactly.
And then you had Western governments opening their NGOs to accept only Christian refugees in Canada, Australia, America, etc. So they have done this soft ethnic cleansing of the Levant from its Christianity, right?
Yeah, it's honestly, I mean, it's disgusting because they do that. They open the NGOs to Christians, and you might be thinking, well, yeah, that sounds great, like save the Christians, but who said they want to leave? Like, why should they have to leave their country? And then the West gets like a free workforce, basically. That's really what it is. I know they have these right-wing nut jobs that are like going, oh yeah, the immigrants and all these things, which is it's like a constant theme, regardless whether we're talking about Syria or not. It's just in the West, you always have, and in the United States, of course, as well. But it's a free workforce. That's really what it's about. Yeah. And because people should know, and I'm sure your audience already knows, that Syria had one of the best, not just universities, but also a free public University of Damascus, right? Like if you wanted to go to a good university in Syria, you're going to the public ones, actually, not the private ones, which is kind of ironic because you would think that, in England, for example, it's kind of the opposite, and you have to pay anyway for all of them. But my point is just that you have so many engineers, so many doctors, so many architects, so many structural engineers, that are coming out of Syria, and now who's going to rebuild the country, right? Like, I mean, even those people that supported the regime change don't want to go back. So, and you can't really, I mean, you can understand that perhaps not from a moral point of view because they supported this, but from a logical point of view, that the country's destroyed, but it needs people to rebuild, and now no one's going to rebuild it. So they sucked out, they did this brain drain, and on top of it, they destroyed the Christian communities. And I'll just add that in Iraq, the same thing happened after 2003 when the UK and the US invaded. They depleted Iraq. I don't know. I forget the figure. I posted it on Twitter a while back, but I can tell you it went from like, it's very, very similar to Syria. It went down like by hundreds of thousands of Christians, right? So in Syria, we used to be 10% of the population. Now it's 1 or 2%. And in Iraq, it's the same. I don't know if it's the same in percentage wise, but I can tell you just in terms of like, net figures, it's hundreds of thousands of Christians that left. 90% of the Christians, basically.
Actually, there is only 160,000 Christians now in Iraq, and their numbers were over 1.5 million before the invasion of Iraq. But now the people are telling us that this is a different case. Iraq is not Iran, they are saying, and this time it's going to be different.
I mean, what?
The other day, I watched a commentary of a woman analyst, basically on the mainstream media. She was saying that don't compare the Iranian people to the Iraqi people. Iranians are not savages, and they will not do this and that. I was like, so what is she basically saying, that the Iraqis and the Syrians are the savages?
Yeah, that's what she's saying. The nerve of these people, like the goddamn nerve. It's like, it's so Zionist, right? Like to bomb someone and then be like, make peace with me, you savage. Just the nerve, honestly, the nerve. I'm looking for the figures here. I think I found, because I posted this just like when it was Christmas, I posted this actually. So in Iraq, and so look, I can tell you Syria in 2011 it was 10%, 1.5 million, and now it's 300,000, and that was, I posted that December, so it's probably even less now, right? Yes. I mean, it was 6 months later, it's probably less. I know for a fact that Christians have been leaving, so it's really awful. It's really awful. It's ethnic cleansing.
I'm receiving a lot of messages from my friends and colleagues in Syria from different sects, different backgrounds. I mean, there is no one with 2 functioning brain cells who wants to stay in the country any longer. They say it's worse than a jungle, because in a jungle you have undeclared rules, even among animals, right? Like animals don't kill each other for fun. And then you're walking in the street and somebody walks by and says, hey, what's your sect? Are you an Alawite or are you a Druze or something? And then they kill you. You know, like this is worse than a jungle. Jungle doesn't happen such things.
Yeah, correct. It doesn't. And you know, this church that was blown up now, I couldn't quite pinpoint where it was, and then I was talking to someone, and they reminded me exactly where it is. So correct me if I'm mistaken, but this is when you're like, you take a micro, you know, from like Syriana Analysis, and you're going to Jaramana. And you, at one point, you see like a cemetery on your right when you're going, and I think that's the cemetery of this exact church.
That's true. That's true. And I was very close to this place only a few months ago when I was in Damascus, and you didn't need a special security, let's say, in Damascus to protect the Christians, because there was this general sense of safety in the capital. And for a long time, for a few years, we haven't seen this type of terrorist attacks carried out against any community in Damascus. So things were relatively stable. But now we have an upside down world, as you mentioned, and now Al-Qaeda regime is in power, and the Western leaders are condemning this attack, but without really pointing their finger to the right direction. And now you have the Chancellor of Germany, you have the Foreign Minister of Germany, France, and many other European countries say they condemn these terrorist attacks against the Christian community, but who endorsed and normalized this regime to begin with in Damascus? They're them, right?
Wasn't Jolani in Paris just like last month?
Yeah, the audacity really. But this is an upside down world. And Richard, since we're speaking about an upside down world, JD Vance was, I think he was on MSNBC, he was on MSNBC yesterday, and he said, "We are not at war with Iran. We are at war with Iran's nuclear program." And this reminds me of the joke that this is not an attack against America during 9/11, but it's an attack against the Twin Towers. So I think only America, only America can make up such
only that, man. No, it's when we say only America, obviously it's like I attribute it to this Zionist gaslighting. Like only an Israeli could come up with something like that, you know. Even when they say we want to burn Tehran, they then like try to walk it back and say, oh no, we got nothing against like the Iranian people. We just want to burn your capital of 10 million people. But this whole nuclear stuff is really, like, it's infuriating for me for two reasons. Because I remember Iraq, how they lied in the run up to that war, and that lasted for over a year, over a year of propaganda. So it was horrendous. But also because I covered the Iran nuclear deal, I know it very well, like down to really minute details, and the way they lie about it is it's like, I don't know, I just want to slap them. I mean, not literally, but you know, almost. It's just so infuriating.
But Richard, this attack was also anticipated against Iran, let's say, nuclear sites. But when you see the outcome of these attacks, do you think the United States was serious in degrading any potential Iranian nuclear capabilities, or this was like we say in Arabic, when the goat climbs over a tree, then you have to bring him down, right? So in this case, if the United States declares victory after these attacks, this is an opportunity to go back to the peace talks or any type of negotiations between the both sides. Some people are saying this is an Israel first policy. Others are saying if America says this is a success, then they are blocking any further Israeli escalation against Iran. How do you see this?
I disagree. I think there's going to be more Israeli escalation and more attacks. And by the way, of course, if you look at it just now, in like as one attack, you could walk away with the assessment or the thought that this is just like a bunch of theater, or it's just a show. But you have to take into account that the Americans, when I say they, I mean the Americans and the Israelis, they've both been attacking Iran's nuclear program for a long time. This is one bombing, one attack amongst many others. And I can give you kind of like a brief timeline. In 2010, Obama and the Israelis started assassinating these Iranian nuclear scientists, and they would do this with the MEK, which is an Iranian, it's a terrorist group that's based outside of Iran, but it's made up of Iranians and it's backed by the West. So they would go on these mopeds, like they would follow these scientists while they're on their way to work, and then just come up on a moped or a bike next to them and just gun them down. They killed like 4 of them, I think 4 scientists between 2010 and 2012. And they also launched a virus called Stuxnet, They infected like basically half the computers on the planet with this, and it wouldn't do anything to your computer. The whole point of that was just that it would spread, and once it would identify a Siemens industrial logical controller, so that's basically, it's a piece of hardware that you connect between the computer and between the centrifuge to make the centrifuge spin and then enrich the uranium gas. So once it would detect that this Siemens logical controller is connected, then it would go and sabotage the centrifuges by making them spin at 3 times the limit. So yeah, so they used that, and that was a joint program between the CIA and Mossad, and that's another case where we could have had radiation leaking. I mean, or contamination rather. It's just the level of recklessness is crazy. And then you fast forward till after the JCPOA, and even while they were trying to get the Americans back into the deal, the Israelis were bombing Natanz. In April 2021, I was in Vienna. I was covering the nuclear deals, the talks for the nuclear deal where they were trying to get the Americans back, and the Israelis went and blew up Natanz, and in response, the Iranians then started enriching to 60%, which they don't tell you, of course. That was a direct consequence. They weren't enriching it. It was just like as a response. So, and there's another one I'm forgetting. I think so they bombed Natanz in April 2021, but there's at least 1 or 2 other attacks I'm forgetting the dates of right now, because I've been going through the whole timeline in the last days. They've attacked Karaj as well, and a bunch of other facilities throughout the last decade. So yeah. I think they've genuinely tried to degrade Iran's nuclear capability, but I don't think that they succeeded. I think they failed. And I think that when I say they failed, I don't just mean in the last days. I mean in the last decade. They failed, generally speaking. And they killed Fakhrizadeh, of course, which is another scientist. He was the head of the program. And that's when the Iranians went to 20%, which they also don't tell you.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's
and now Iran says they will withdraw, right, from the NPT.
They're threatening to. Yeah, they're trying to pass a bill in the Mejlis, in the parliament, and I don't think they're going to. I have a feeling the Iranians are not going to do that. I could be wrong, but they've threatened to do this in the past and they didn't. So I don't know what's going to happen. But I'll just say this: they have that possibility right now. If they wanted to go and develop a bomb, they can do that. But I just want to be very clear: they have not chosen to do that up until now. So just because they have the technology to do it, it doesn't mean that they actually, that they actually had chosen to go and build nuclear bombs before. That's not true.
Does Iran have the technology to build a weapon? Because they have talking about the delivery systems, the launchers, and many different infrastructure they need before. Like you can build the bomb, but you cannot fire the bomb if you don't have the technology for that. In this case, are they capable of doing this nationally, or are they going to get it from?
Yeah, they can.
Yes, they can. Okay.
They can do it. Yeah, this. I don't know if you saw an interview with Tucker Carlson and Ted Cruz.
Ted Cruz, oh my God, yes, I did.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just going to close the window 1 sec because the lighting is changing now. Okay, no, so yeah, I'll tell you something really funny. Ted Cruz, he called it outbreak level, which makes it sound like it's influenza or something. It's called breakout time. It's not outbreak level. I laughed so much when he said that. It's so Ted Cruz. So basically that is it's a technical term that refers to the amount of time required for Iran or any actor to enrich enough fissile material or uranium in order to build a bomb. So when people give Netanyahu crap and they say that he's been lying, I don't want to defend him, but just to play devil's advocate, quite literally, he isn't 100% wrong, because that thing has changed throughout the years. Sometimes they were closer, sometimes they were a bit further from building it because their capabilities have been degraded. And technically it's true. You could say that for example, if someone doesn't, we're talking about Iran and you look at them during the last years, you could always say that they're like 1 year away from building a bomb because they're not going for it. They have the tech, but they're not going for it. So it's like they're waiting at the starting line of a race, but they haven't moved. So no matter how many years go by, if you're looking at them and you can keep saying that statement and it will kind of be true. You know what I mean? So yes. I'm not defending Netanyahu.
No, I totally understand that. Yeah, I totally understand your point. And in this case, I'm wondering what's the obstacle for Iran to develop a nuke in an international system that doesn't really respect rules-based international order. This is just, BS. And everybody understood after 80 years after World War II that unless you have a very strong power on your back protecting you, or a nuke, then you are exposed, or you will be like on the side of the United States, just accepting the international monetary system. The central banks, your central bank will be owned by the US, and the rest is history. We know these things. So that's why when the regime change happened in Syria, I received calls from colleagues, Emirati colleagues, telling me, like, you see, Kevork, like, this is our point. Like, we know that the US is too powerful, and we're not crazy enough to, challenge the US. So we are just sailing according to the wind, like now the wind is in favor of the US. In the future, when things change, we will also change.
I mean, that's basically a way to say I have no principles.
Exactly. And this is the thing with politics, many countries say, like, why should I sacrifice my country if this could mean the loss of my infrastructure and my country, basically, and paying a huge price from my people? I will choose to be a silent actor, or I will choose just to be submitted to the US diktats. And in this case, we have to mention to our respected audience that one of the main issues with Iran is its sovereign economic status, and that is that their central bank is owned by Iran and not by the outside world. And Syria was the same thing, and you mentioned this many times. Syria had $15 million. They owed 15 million. Yeah.
That's a joke, man. Like, you have human beings that have more money than that. Like,
yes,
like
so
that
true.
have actually both in capital and in debt. Speaking of which, right? So,
but they're not necessarily smart, even when they have all this money. And one of these people pushing for regime change in Iran nowadays is PBD, Public Bet David, and a very big fan of Pahlavi, calling him the crown prince, my crown prince. Who crowned him to begin with? Seriously.
It's like back to the 16th century, like,
But they want democracy for Iran, and then they want to bring back the son of Shah. Like, how make it make sense? It doesn't make any sense.
Thank you. Like, it's like the UK, where monarchy, but we're democracy. Say, which one is it?
Yeah.
I mean, okay, UK is different, of course. Some smart ass will be like, yeah, but it's a parliamentary monarchy. Anyway, your point still stands, and honestly, you asked me what the obstacle is. There's several obstacles. I'm sure your audience, and this, that there's a fatwa, a religious decree against nuclear bombs in Iran. So from a religious standpoint, they need to get rid of that. That's number one. The other obstacle, of course, is simply time. They have the technology to enrich the uranium. They've got IR4, IR6, and IR8 centrifuges. An IR6, if you compare that to the IR1, which is their first generation, it can enrich uranium at 10 times the speed. And they have the IR8, which is even better. So right now, I don't think the breakout time is a year. I think it would be less, because the cap that they had on centrifuges was 50,000 and 60. Sorry, not 50,000. It's 5,060. But they removed it, and they've gone back to, I don't know. It used to be 20,000 before the nuclear deal. They had 20,000 centrifuges. You'll forgive me, I don't have the latest figures on that. It's also secret. I don't think they would even tell us the actual number. But they have far exceeded the limit of 5,000. So I would say they're in between 10 to 20,000 centrifuges now. So they would probably need a year or less to get to that level of fissile material. But even then, it's not proof of a nuclear weapons program. You still need to have enough heavy water. You still need to have, the delivery mechanism prepared, which involves a lot of testing. You need to, do a lot of, and this would be detectable, of course, with seismographs and there's other means, of course, of detecting these massive explosions and nuclear tests. You can't hide them anymore. Everyone would know. And as a matter of fact, even right now, after the nuclear deal is broken down, even just with the NPT, and by the way, the additional protocol also broke down. But even with just the NPT, with the non-proliferation treaty, the IAEA have enough eyes inside or on Iran's nuclear facilities to be able to judge as well if they're building a nuclear bomb. And they've said that they're not. So, my point is just that they have many avenues to choose. They can, continue putting pressure on the US or whatever. I don't think that's going to work. And I honestly, anyone who tries to sell that in Iran right now, I think is going to be slapped, because, before before you had these two camps in Iran that were the main political rivals. You have these so-called reformists like Jawad Zarif, who's the foreign minister that negotiated the nuclear deal. And then you have, of course, the hardliners, so-called hardliners, like Raisi and so on. You know, and the hardliners would make the argument that, no, you can't negotiate with America. This is pointless. It's just, you know, they wouldn't say explicitly, let's build the bomb. You'd have a few MPs who would say it like that directly. But, you know, their position was basically that don't trust the Americans. Whereas the reformists had the position, no, we need to open up. We need to welcome Western investment. And that's what they did, of course. That was the point behind the nuclear deal. We need to lift the sanctions and so on and so on. And whereas the hardliners are more like, let's go with BRICS, let's go with Belt and Road Initiative, let's open up to the East rather than the West. So right now, I think those hardliners, I hate this stupid name, they have more leverage and
let's say principled
capital.
Let's call them
principled is exactly, that's another way to say it. Exactly, yeah. These principled politicians or conservatives, whatever name you want to give them, I think it's their moment to shine right now in Iran. Everyone is kind of like, okay, obviously the West is deranged and you can't negotiate or open up to them no matter what you do. So they have a lot of political capital that they can dispose of now. And honestly, if you ask me, I think because I've seen how patient Iran was. It's almost naive. You could almost call it naive. The point to which they were patient. You know, like I know they responded with increased uranium and they increased the number of centrifuges and they passed the cap on the number of kilos of enriched UF6 gas and the heavy water, the metric tons. They passed all these things, but even then it wasn't enough. Obviously, every step until now, it succeeded in guarding their nuclear program, but it failed in getting the West to back off. So really, I see only one option here, which is building the bomb. Now, that's going to be very difficult because if they start testing it, and that again will be visible and detectable to many countries around the world, not just Israel and the US. I think once they do that, I think we're going to see a real escalation, because that might be when the Americans and Israelis go really like, okay, we need to destroy that country and cripple its infrastructure. Oh yeah, by the way, just speaking of infrastructure, just one last thing. One way that they attacked Natanz wasn't with explosives once. They cut the power and then the backup power, and then the centrifuges snapped. So they've used viruses against Natanz. They've used cutting the power and explosives, and now they've bombed it by air. So they've thrown a lot of things at that facility.
And this was bombed by the B-2 strategic bombers, probably also flying from Qatar, because they host these strategic bombers as well. I was really wondering, since you mentioned if Iran wants to acquire the bomb, then everybody will know, right? Because of the tests. And then how did Israel hide its nukes basically without the test? Because between 70 to 300 nuclear warheads, are they getting it like ready or tested already? What's happening there?
Exactly. Yeah, I was also thinking about that too the other day. And honestly, someone raised I forget who this was, but someone raised an interesting point that maybe they don't have nukes. Maybe it's just bollocks.
Imagine that is the case.
It's a good point. It's really a good point. It could just be complete bollocks because we have no way of knowing if they actually have it. So
I mean, in 1973, I think in 73, when the surprise attack happened on the Yom Kippur, Israelis claimed later that they were ready to nuke Syria or Egypt to back them off, but then the conventional army was enough. So we don't really, I really don't know if they have it. I would assume they do, because whoever created Israel was crazy enough to also give them the nukes. Really, like this is something that has created a lot of, let's say, instability in the region, and since then the region hasn't witnessed any stability, and always the victims are one-sided. In this case, the Israelis are the victims all the time. By the way, Richard, some of the people are worried about you, and they say, Richard, you have to lose some weight. You're eating out of stress. It's not good for you. Take care of yourself. And I wanna ask you about. I don't want details about this, but is there any way for the people also to support you with your case with the both governments right now in Austria and also in the UK?
Yeah, right now, so basically they haven't charged me yet. I don't know if they're going to do that or not. But for now, it's just the equipment that really crippled me. They took like tens of thousands of euros worth of equipment. So I have a GoFundMe and a Patreon, basically. That's really the main thing. But as long as there's no legal case or charges, then I don't need legal aid for now, thankfully.
And those links are attached in your X account?
Yeah, exactly. They're on YouTube, actually. They're in my YouTube. In every single video, I put it in the description on YouTube.
The channel, guys, you all know Richard. Everybody watches this channel already knows Richard, and I have already tagged him in the description below, his YouTube channel, also his X account. You can also go to his website for any type of support and assistance you can give to Richard in this case, because this is detrimental, just like any other journalist who is receiving lots of either backlash or legal cases against them. And I think this has been normalized nowadays because not enough people spoke out and against such acts. And as you can see, I'm operating this YouTube channel, jumping over the words, because I live in Germany, and I have to deliver my messages in a different way for you. Otherwise, even using some of the terminologies could lead into serious consequences nowadays. Unfortunately, speaking has become a crime, especially that we are really pushing against a mass slaughter, let's say, of Palestinians in Gaza. We are pushing against a regime change, which led into catastrophic consequences in Syria. And now they're trying to do the same thing in Iran. So I think in this case, I believe that we have the moral high ground. I have no doubt about it. And therefore, I believe it's really essential, guys, to support independent journalists. And believe me, if any, you can see Richard, he's a skilled journalist. He does his research. He's a very good speaker. If he chose to go to the mainstream press, how much do you think he would have gained now, right?
It's not. I didn't even think about that. What are you doing?
I have done the test of BBC, Richard. This was in 2016. Out of curiosity, I applied for a test. So you go through 3 different tests. They test you if you're good enough to become a journalist in BBC. And I passed all the exams. And then I reached to the interview exam, of course. And then they Google your name, and then you're done. You're cooked. They would never choose you.
You got to make sure to switch your tone a little bit in advance to give them some headroom.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. Like, if they were a reputable mainstream media outlet that were
it's funny, Kevork? I don't want to cut you off, but what's funny is that I think Matt Kennard raised this the other.
Let's see if we lost Richard temporarily.
To be more objective back then than it is today, which is really, really saying something.
Yeah. We just lost you for a few seconds, Richard, but you're back again. I think in this case, when it comes to Iran, I'm also worried of false flag attacks. And how do we know that? We have some signals coming from, for example, a channel like CNN. They say Iran sleeper cells warning. So what they're basically saying is with the migrant crisis in the southern borders of the United States, Iran has sent hundreds, probably thousands of sleeper, including Hezbollah operatives. This is what they're saying, that they're already in the United States. And I have heard many of the terrorism experts on big major podcasts in the US saying basically things like Iran supports Al-Qaeda, and the Al-Qaeda operatives will conduct terrorist attacks in the United States. And I'm Richard, you're laughing, but do you think this is incompetence? Do you think this is incompetence, or this is a deliberate brainwashing? This is a serious question, because if someone who was a terrorism expert and used to work for the CIA, and now this person says that Iran sent hundreds of operatives, including Hezbollah fighters, and they're supporting Al-Qaeda cells inside the country to carry out attacks.
What?
And I don't look because this is like Ted Cruz when he was asked, "What's the population of Iran? Yeah. What's the ethnic components of Iran?" If politician like Ted Cruz doesn't know how many people exist basically in Iran, like 92 million, right? And so which means if there is an instability, at least you will have how many million people living probably the country becoming migrants and refugees, and they're the same ones saying we don't want refugees and migrants in our country. This is my major issue.
Know. Yeah.
Like today I read for a German politician, his name is Maximilian Krah, he's from the AfD, and he says, I'm on the side of Trump, and but you guys saying we want to send back all the illegal migrants from our countries, and then how is it possible that you support Trump's another offensive war against another sovereign country, which create millions of new refugees in Europe? So for who are you working, guys?
Yeah, bingo. I mean, just for clarity's sake, because I know they use these like interchangeably, but like obviously like asylum seeker and refugee. Basically, a refugee is someone who has sought asylum and had their application approved. So they're almost the same thing, but sometimes people who seek asylum, even with legitimate like political or whatever or economic reasons, or they're being persecuted. They sometimes get rejected, so they don't get that refugee status. But your point still stands. Your point is just as valid, because in the end, some refugees actually might or asylum seekers might actually go in illegally because the process is made difficult or too difficult on purpose. I can give you just the example of the UK. They keep talking about the boats and the boats, like, as if it's the Vikings all over again, like 8th century. That's. They don't tell you that actually to apply for asylum in the UK, you have to be on British soil. You can't go to an embassy, and the UK actually helped draft the Refugee Convention of what was it, 53 or 51? And so it's a primary signatory. It should care about this document, this international obligation that it has, and yet they demonize all these migrants. You even had like the news at one point getting on a boat and like trying to interview people that were half drowning in the middle of the channel. I mean, like the level of dehumanization is off the charts. And so where do these people come from? Why are they coming? It's because they've been bombed, because they've been raped, pillaged. Their economy has been raped by Western imperialism for hundreds of years. Whether we're talking about India, we're talking about Africa, you have these migrants, as they call them, economic migrants. I don't like that term because it makes it sound like someone who's going, who's just moving because they don't like their job or something. No. They can't find a job. They can't feed their families. They can't live normally because all of that wealth has been sucked up like a vacuum cleaner and moved into Western capitals. That's why London and Paris and Berlin and all these cities, have good infrastructure, because they stole the resources from the global South and used it to build up their own cities. And now people that are the victims of that imperialism are saying, I want to go and live over there where you stole my stuff. And where you told me for hundreds of years, you brainwashed us into thinking the white man is better and all this stuff. Well, okay, I want to go see how good the white man is. It's rooted in this. That's the root of it. So right now, when you're bombing Iran, of course you're going to cause mass displacement. We saw it in Iraq, and we were talking about the Christians earlier, and that was just one section of the population. You look at the whole populace, so not just in terms of groups of ethnicity or religion, but you look at the whole population. We're talking about millions of people from Libya, from Syria, from Iraq, from Lebanon, from sub-Saharan Africa, because the Sahel has also been impacted by what happened in Libya. So Niger, Chad, Mali, they've all had their countries also impacted because of NATO and because of France and the US bombing and taking out Gaddafi. So they create these messes, they create these disasters, they meaning the West, and then they demonize the free workforce that is coming over to their shores. It's astonishing. They should be happy, honestly, that these refugees aren't coming with tanks and planes the way we did in their countries. Really.
I heard an argument recently by many people who say they're anti-war, but they're on the right. And they say we shouldn't intervene in Iran because it will create a refugee crisis. And that's the only argument they want to present. Like, we in Europe, we don't want to get into this war because it will create a refugee crisis. So if that means in the future they find a way to lock the people inside their countries and they can bomb them the hell out, just like in Gaza, then that is okay? What kind of argument
this
is that?
Is what shocks me. No, another great one, and you'll hear this is my favorite. It's like, oh yeah, Americans don't want to get involved. Well, fuck what you want. You shouldn't be murdering people. Even if you want to murder them, you shouldn't do it. It doesn't matter what you like or you don't like. Sorry, I don't know if you curse on your show. That came out
I do.
And yeah, and it's like, oh, the troops, they were exhausted. Screw your troops. Screw your troops, man. The civilians come first, and no one else.
And that's the thing with the threats. Like, if you attack an American, then you attacked us all. But sorry, your army is basically stationed on my border, or even within my border, right? Yeah. Like, how is it self-defense? You're defending yourself from within my country. Like when the U.S. occupation forces bombed some Syrian forces inside the country, and then they used to say,
"Yeah, I remember."
Oh, we acted in a self-defense manner, and it's like, how is it? How are you self-defending yourself inside my country? So that's why I say this war against Iran, it's partly due to the uranium enrichment, and also there is a big part of it because of the sovereignty of Iran. We are living in a post-sovereign world. This is how they see it in the US and in Israel, in other places. And any country that preserved its sovereignty must be destroyed and then financially and economically taken over through the financial means. And you invest in this country, just like they are doing now in Syria, in telecommunication, in fuel, ports. Everything is for a multinational corporation. So they don't need to send troops. They already occupied the country, right?
Exactly. You know, and that was very, very funny and benevolent and generous of Qatar and Saudi Arabia to pay off Syria's $15 million. Like, what did that take? Like 1% of the personal wealth of one prince? Like, this is ridiculous, honestly. You know, they act like Syria couldn't pay it. Maybe Syria didn't want to pay it because it didn't want to be, you know, taken over afterwards by the IMF and the World Bank, which are really just tools of imperialism. I mean, they are under the umbrella of the UN. That doesn't change what I just said. They are still tools of imperialism. And like you said, they take over the country economically. They don't even need to send troops for that. Then you own the banks, you own the corporations, you own the oil fields. Why do you need troops? You can just pull the plug any second and get your way. So, you know, it's very, very important to underscore what you just said about sovereignty, because that is really the main issue that they have with Iran, is that, and Donald Trump said this in so many words when he pulled out of the nuclear deal in May 2018. He said that he raised the issue rather of Iran's ballistic missiles. Now he's tried to frame it as, well, this is a delivery mechanism. I mean, that's kind of ridiculous, because you can put a nuclear bomb in a suitcase, you can put it in a car, you can put it inside of a shark if you want to, and then send the shark somewhere. You know, I'm kind of exaggerating now, but you know, let's say a whale then instead. Okay, you could put it inside of a whale and then just send the whale off. And I'm not trying to give anyone ideas here, but my point is to say that Donald Trump.
Don't take it literally, guys.
Yeah, I'm just saying Donald Trump is full of it. Iran, you see right now what they're doing with those ballistic missiles. They don't have nuclear warheads, but they are helping Iran defend itself from Israel. That's why he pulled out of the nuclear deal, because he wanted to cripple them economically. The idea was, if we put sanctions on them, we ban them from SWIFT, and we pull all of this Western investment. And by the way, you have Western companies, telecommunications giants and gas and oil giants. Gas giants, it sounds like a planet. Who invested billions of dollars in Iran and lost that money because of Donald Trump, because they you know, the nuclear deal opened up those doors, and then they took advantage of it, and then they lost all that investment. But my point is just that by getting that economy crippled, his idea was that, okay, well, then they can't invest in defense, and then they can't build conventional weapons, not nuclear ones, but just conventional weapons, meaning you know, everything from bullets to ballistic missiles, and also, of course, he mentions terrorism. Now, when he says terrorism, and I better watch my mouth now, you know, he's talking about Iran's foreign policy and the groups that they like. So basically, he wanted to cripple those things. Why? Because they affect Israel, right? These groups are not they don't interact with the United States. They interact with Israel. I'm trying to be very objective now with the language. They interact with Israel. Yeah, that's what they do. They interact with Israel. So my point is just that foreign policy was too sovereign for America, and it speaks to your point about how we live in a post-sovereign world. There's no room for that in an empire. You're going to do what I tell you, and you're going to shut up, and you're going to like it. And that's what they wanted from Syria, and that's what they wanted from Iran. And our fears came true. That, you know, once Syria was lost, you could say goodbye to Palestine and Lebanon, and Iran is next on the chopping block, lo and behold.
Yeah. I just want to answer to our friend Reber Bakir. He says, why is Syria, Iraq, and Turkey a valid country and Israel not? They were all created by the West, and I would like to say something about this, including, first of all, Syria, Lebanon, for example, Iraq, and Palestine and Jordan. Those countries were divided by Sykes-Picot. That's why I don't really believe that there are borders between these countries. I believe I believe in the Levant as a region. I believe in economic integration and probably federal system among these countries. This is what I believe. That doesn't mean it will happen. I don't believe in these artificial borders. That's why I said many, many times what happens in Syria will reflect on Palestine, but all these, sorry to say, idiots who supported the regime change in Syria claiming to be pro-Palestine, because they don't even understand the basics of geopolitics. There are things that happen in Lebanon affect Syria. Syria affects Lebanon. When Syria sneezes, Lebanon gets cold, right? So I don't believe in these artificial borders. And when it comes to Turkey, of course, I don't recognize the territories they have ethnically cleansed from the Armenians, Assyrians, the Greek people, from the Alawites. So many people they ethnically cleansed, including my grandparents, right? And people tell me nowadays, these Jolani people, why do you speak about Syria? You're Armenian, go back to Armenian. I'm like, these people know anything about history? It's like my grandparents lived under the Ottoman Empire, and they were near Kilis, Antab, in the current southern Turkey. So if I want to go back to my country, okay, give me back my apartment, give me back my farm, right? Exactly. I can go back there. But you guys kicked us out from my basically land, and then we went to Syria, and now we're kicked out again from the second place. So this is my opinion about this, and especially when it comes to Israel state has been established on the bodies of 700,000 Palestinians. Like the Nakba was a major tragedy which happened, which is an expulsion, forced expulsion of 700,000 Palestinians from their farms, from their land, right? And then you establish a state over it. That's the problem that we're talking about. It's not about Jews, it's not about religion, it's not about this and that. I don't care. If the Hindus came to Palestine and kicked out 700,000 people, would you call me like a Hindu-phobic or something? No, I'm just talking about the occupation of this land, right?
Yeah, exactly. No, that's excellently put. And you know, just to kind of underscore what you're saying, I mean, the borders are so random. Well, in a way they're random, but at the same time they've been done on purpose based on sectarian lines. And I think they even wanted to go further than they did. They wanted to divide Syria up then, in like Syria meaning after they've taken out a chunk for Israel and for Palestine and for Lebanon and for Jordan and Iraq and Turkey. They even wanted to break Syria up into smaller cantons, like you have a Christian area and one for Alawites, and it's just that's
Richard, there is a strong argument. Sorry to interrupt you. There is a strong argument that the 3 stars on the Syrian French Mandate flag, which now they adopted after the regime change, there is a strong argument that each star represented one ethnic and religious community in the country. So they believed back since then about the separation of Syria and the division of Syria. Now,
I see. Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, we have far more than 3 groups.
Yeah. I mean, back then, those were the major groups. So they put 3 flags on it. And many people also do not know, guys, that the former flag of Syria, which I recognize with the 2 stars, this is not the flag of the Ba'ath regime. This is the flag adopted during the unity between Egypt and Syria.
Exactly.
And one star represented Syria and the other star represented Egypt. And this is more about the unity of the region and not the division and the separation of the region.
Yeah. And that's a Nasserist flag. That's an anti-imperialist flag. That's the whole point of it. It's Bashar al-Assad wasn't even born when that flag was adopted, was he? When's his birthday?
No, he was not. He was not born back.
Right, but his father was not in power, so this was not a Ba'athist regime or government. It was a Nasserist flag, and actually some people complain that the Egyptians are too much control, but that's besides the point right now. Just to speak to what you were saying earlier about the division of the region. I mean, Mosul, for example, which is now, many people remember the Battle of Mosul, like 2016. More like what wasn't really a battle. I mean, the Americans bombed the crap out of it and leveled it to destroy ISIS, which they created in the first place. So, but anyway, Mosul used to be in Iraq, in Syria. Now it's in Iraq. That's one of the changes they made with the border. If you look at Turkey, for example, Antioch. I mean, anyone who knows the Crusader history, or medieval history, it knows that was always been in Syria, and that was just given then to the Ottomans as part, not part of Sykes-Picot, but I mean part of, basically at the end of World War One. What happened is the Turkish Empire, the Ottoman Empire, was defeated, and then, you know, to kind of like compensate them or placate them rather, they stole a bunch of land from Armenia, they stole a bunch of land from Syria, and then just gave it to them. So Turkey's current borders are another product of Western imperialism. So, you know, that's one thing to keep in mind. And then, of course, I mean, Israel, quote unquote Israel, and, you know, Lebanon, Palestine. Yes, all these regions existed at one point or another in ancient history or in recent history, but it was the whole region until Gaza, you know, was considered Syria. And you can, you know, Gaza was considered the last part of Syria before you cross into Egypt. It doesn't mean that Palestine has never existed and it was always Syria. No, it just means Gaza was an area inside of Palestine, and Palestine was inside of Greater Syria. That's what it means. So, you know, and I agree with what you said, that, you know, hopefully you would see something like a federal system, I suppose, because it might be a bit difficult to get like an actual one single country out of the Levant. So maybe a federal system, because if the Europeans can do it and they don't even have one common language or one common religion or history, then what is the excuse to stop Arabs from doing it? It does, you know, and when that flag that Syria had was created during the union between Egypt and Syria, that wasn't the first time that Syria and Egypt had been united. Salah ad-Din also united them, and there's probably another time in history I'm forgetting right now. So my point is just that it's happened several instances throughout history where you've had the Levant united, or the Levant plus Egypt, or the whole Arab world, you know, united. It's not something that we're hypothesizing. It's happened, and it could happen again, hopefully. But I think one of the reasons that it doesn't happen, whether that's the main reason or not, you know, people can decide. But one of the main reasons is because the West is afraid of competition. Because if you had a united Arab world, look at all the wealth that exists from the oil, from the gas, or the trade routes. And I don't just mean the ancient Silk Road. I mean also the shipping lanes. You know, the Strait of Gibraltar, Suez Canal, Bab el-Mandeb, Strait of Hormuz. There's so much control and power in this region that they had to break it up and fracture it to keep their power, but it doesn't make it legitimate or correct.
Last point, my friend, before we wrap up this conversation, and that is why the current Syria, led by Abu Muhammad al-Jolani, is silent about the confrontation between Israel and Iran, to the extent that the minions of Jolani and the trumpets of Jolani on social media platforms saying Allahumma adrib al-zalimina bil-zalimin wa akhrijna minhum salimin, which means may God hit the oppressor with another oppressor, and we like get out from the situation safely. I said, I mean, there is an entire big article on, I think this is on the New York Times, as other Arab states condemn Israeli attacks on Iran. Syria is notably silent. Yeah, I said, because he's a CIA asset, you're welcome. Like, I don't think they need a big chunk of article to to explain why Syria is silent. I think they silently wish that Israel would knock out Iran.
No, it's, I mean, you know, you have people who are suggesting, and I don't know if this is true. I have no way of knowing, because Israel bombed the passport and immigration authority in December, right? Yeah, so they destroyed a bunch of records, and I think that was the first place they bombed. Now, if you're Israel and you're dying to get inside of Syria and get rid of that government for 50 goddamn years, why would you bomb that building first? That is so strange, right? I think what they were doing is they were destroying records about some of their agents or some people inside the country, maybe Jolani, maybe, I don't know, that they basically want to make sure no one ever finds out that those people have ties, whether they're familial ties or whether they are political or whatever, to Israel. So that is one hypothesis. It's one idea. You know, you can call it whatever you like, but this is not it's not me who came up with that. I'm just you know, reflecting some opinions that we see on social media that Jolani could actually have maybe familial ties, and it's not too hard to imagine when you consider that in the 60s. There is a spy, an Israeli spy called Eli Cohen, whose real name, that is his real name, but he came up with a fake name, and was Amin al-Thabit, I think. Yeah, and actually, originally he is Syrian, which is kind of ironic. His parents are Jews from Aleppo who went to Egypt. And so my point is just that he almost became the defense minister in Syria. He infiltrated the upper echelons, the top brass of Syria's military. He gave intelligence to the Israelis that helped them during the Six-Day War. So he was very, very instrumental. And then he was caught ultimately. I think the Russians caught his Morse code
The Indians.
Oh, really?
Yeah. The Indians
okay.
The transmitters.
Learn something new every day. So in any case, they caught his Morse code transmissions, and then he was executed and so on. And I think Jolani speaking, which repatriated his body and his possessions now.
Yeah, he did.
Like out of all the priorities
he even allowed the Israeli Secret Service to come to Damascus and torture some of the Palestinian leaders in Damascus to get the location of the remnants of basically many Israeli soldiers who were killed during the battles with Syria in the 80s, in Marj al-Sultan battle, for example, in Lebanon. So the Secret Service of Israel comes to Damascus. So this is something very important. Like, there is a very good relationship between the Mossad and the CIA and different secret services, right? But at no time the American Secret Service would allow the Mossad, under any circumstances, to come inside a base basically and torture someone they have had in their hands to get to extract words from, or any statements from this guy.
I can't think of an example. You're right.
This is anyways, I just want to say something, Richard, about this Eli Cohen. Eli Cohen used exact Jeffrey Epstein parties in Syria to infiltrate the political and military class. He organized parties in his big villa that he used to have. Women, alcohol, etc. And people, when they're drunk, they start talking about secret military secrets, to the extent that he knew the maps of the Syrian military positions in the Golan Heights, and he went there and he recommended the Syrian army to build a certain type of trees as shadow,
like shades,
but
shades were markers and target markers.
Imagine. So I think Jolani is the new Eli Cohen. Like, this is my interpretation. Basically, he's the new Eli Cohen.
That's basically my point. Whether he is actually Jewish or not is kind of irrelevant. I mean, he serves Israel. That's really the final bottom line, is that he serves Israeli interests, and that's not just me hypothesizing or using hyperbole. No, he, as you pointed out, he is openly cooperating, and I pointed out as well, he's openly cooperating with the Israelis on multiple fronts. And by the way, I'll just raise this point as well, that with the bombing that just took place, which I also think is very easily attributable to Jolani, either directly or indirectly. Just think of whoever did that, whoever bombed this church. They had the option of going for illegal checkpoints and bases from belonging to NATO, whether that's Turkey or the United States, that are illegally occupying Syria, or Israeli checkpoints in the Golan Heights, and then
20 kilometers away from Damascus.
Exactly. Yeah. It's right next door. It's a joke. So instead of going for those military targets, they choose to go after civilians at mass. Who would do that? Who would do that? Who has a history, a habit of throwing grenades in synagogues and bombing mosques? Who has a history of doing that? I think it's the list is very short. So there you go.
Guys, you can make up your mind about which country he's talking about. We will not mention that country now, literally. So we will not get into further trouble after today's live streaming. But if you want to listen to more trouble analysis and commentaries from Richard, his YouTube channel is tagged in the description below. Also, his X account is being active again, and he's also doing.
They're watching me, by the way. I some people thought I was joking, and they really have spies and police who read my tweets and watch my videos every day. They collect everything I'm saying, and it's wild, honestly.
Because you may say 100 words and one word could incriminate you in their eyes. So that's why we're trying to be more careful about our opinions. Guys, I would like also to thank you for tuning in today. It was a blast. 1,300 people were watching this live. I appreciate all of you. This is only on YouTube. So thank you also for those who tuned in on Rumble and Ganjin World. For those who are looking forward for the next episode, it's going to be tomorrow, of course, at 5 p.m. Central European Time, 11 a.m. Eastern American Time. Peace be upon you, upon your families, and peace be upon you, Richard. And I will see you soon. Salam.
Thank you.